The rules are really the most fundamental mechanic. They define the space, the objects, the actions, the consequences of the actions, the constraints on the actions, and the goals. In other words, they make possible all the mechanics we have seen so far and add the crucial thing that makes a game, goals. Parlet's rule analysis. David Parlet, game historian, did a very good job of analyzing the different kinds of rules that are involved with gameplay, as shown in this diagram. This shows the relationships between all the kinds of rules we are likely to encounter, so let's consider each. Operational rules. These are the easiest to understand. These are basically what the players do to play the game. When players understand the operational rules, they can play a game. Foundational rules. Foundational rules are the underlying formal structure of the game. The operational rules might say the player should roll a 6-sided die and collect that many power chips. The foundational rules would be more abstract. The player's power value is increased by a random number from 1 to 6. Foundational rules are a mathematical representation of game state and how and when it changes. Boards, dice, chips, health meters, etc. are all just operational ways of keeping track of the foundational game state. As Parlet's diagram shows, foundation rules inform operational rules. There's not yet any standard notation for representing these rules, and there is some question about whether a complete notation is even possible. In real life, game designers learn to see the foundational rules on an as-needed basis, but seldom do they have any need to formally document the entire set of foundational rules in a completely abstract way. Behavioral rules. These are rules that are implicit to gameplay, which most people naturally understand as part of good sportsmanship. For example, during a game of chess, one should not tickle the other player while they are trying to think, or take 5 hours to make a move. These are seldom stated explicitly, mostly everyone knows them. The fact that they exist underlines the point that a game is a kind of social contract between players. These two inform the operational rules. Steven Snyderman has written an excellent essay about behavioral rules called Unwritten Rules. Written rules. There are the rules that come with the game. The document that players have to read to gain an understanding of the operational rules. Of course, in reality, only a small number of people read this document. Most people learn a game by having someone else explain how to play. Why? It is very hard to encode the nonlinear intricacies of how to play a game into a document, and similarly hard to decode such a document. Modern video games have gradually been doing away with written rules in favor of having the game itself teach players how to play through interactive tutorials. This hands-on approach is far more effective, though it can be challenging and time-consuming to design and implement as it involves many iterations that cannot be completed until the game is in its final state. Every game designer must have a ready answer to the question, how will players learn to play my game? Because if someone can't figure out your game, they will not play it. Laws. These only form when games are played in serious, competitive settings, where the stakes are high enough that a need is felt to explicitly record the rules of good sportsmanship, or where there is need to clarify or modify the official written rules. These are often called tournament rules, since during a serious tournament is when there is most need for this kind of official clarification. Consider these tournament rules for playing Tekken 5, a fighting game, at the 2005 Penny Arcade Expo. Single elimination, you may bring your own controller, standard versus mode, 100% health, random stage select, 60-second timer, best 3 of 5 rounds, best 2 of 3 games, Mokujin is banned. Most of these are just clarifying exactly which game settings will be used in the tournament. You may bring your own controller is a formalized decision about what is fair play. The most interesting rule here is Mokujin is banned. Mokujin is one of the characters you can choose to play in Tekken 5. The general feeling among players is that Mokujin's stun move is so powerful that any player who chooses to play Mokujin is likely to win the game, making a tournament pointless. So, this law is an attempt to improve the game, ensuring the tournament is balanced, fair, and fun. Official rules. These are created when a game is played seriously enough that a group of players feels a need to merge the written rules with the laws. Over time, these official rules later become the written rules. In chess, when a player makes a move that puts the opponent's king in danger of checkmate, that player is obligated to warn the opponent by saying check. At one time, this was a law, not a written rule, but now it is part of the official rules. Advisory rules, often called rules of strategy, these are just tips to help you play better, and not really rules at all from a game mechanics standpoint. House rules. These rules are not explicitly described by Parlet, but he does point out that as players play a game, you may find that they want to tune the operational rules to make the game more fun. This is the feedback on this diagram, since house rules are usually created by players in response to a deficiency perceived after a few rounds of play. Modes. Many games have very different rules during different parts of play. The rules often change completely from mode to mode, almost like completely separate games. One memorable instance was the racing game Pit Stop. Most of the time, it was a typical racing game, but with a twist. If you didn't pull over to change your tires periodically, they would burst. When you did pull over, the game changed completely. Now, you are not racing your car, but rather racing to change your tires, with a completely different game interface. When your game changes modes in a dramatic way like this, it is very important that you let your players know which mode you are in. Too many modes and the players get confused. Very often, there's one main mode with several sub-modes, which is a good hierarchical way to organize the different modes. Game designer Sid Meier proposes an excellent rule of thumb. Players should never spend so much time in a sub-game that they forget what they were doing in the main game. The Enforcer. One of the most significant differences between video games and more traditional games is how the rules are enforced. In traditional games, rules are primarily enforced by the player themselves or by an impartial referee in high-stakes games, such as sporting events. With computer games, it becomes possible, and sometimes necessary, for the computer to enforce the rules. This is more than convenience. It allows for the creation of games much more complex than was traditionally possible, because now the players don't have to memorize all the rules about what is and is not possible. They just try things in the game and see what works and what doesn't work. They don't have to memorize it at all or look it up. In a sense, what used to be a rule now becomes a physical constraint of the game world. If a piece isn't allowed to move a certain way, it simply doesn't move that way. Many of the game rules are enforced by the design of the space, the objects, and the actions. A game like Warcraft could conceivably be a board game, but there would be so many rules to remember and state to keep track of that it would quickly become a dreary experience. By offloading the dull work of rules enforcement into the computer, games can reach depths of complexity, subtlety, and richness that are not possible any other way. But proceed with caution. If the rules of your video game are so complex that a player can't even form a rough idea of how the game works, they will be overwhelmed and confused. You must make the rules of complex video game something that players can discover and understand naturally, not something they have to memorize. The most important rule. Games have a lot of rules, how to move and what you can and cannot do, but there is one rule at the foundation of all the others, the object of the game. Games are about achieving goals. You must be able to state your game's goal and state it clearly. Often, there's not just one goal in a game, but a sequence of them. You'll need to state each and how they relate to one another. A clumsy statement of your game's goal can be off-putting to players right from the beginning. If they don't completely understand the purpose of their actions, they cannot proceed with any certainty. Newcomers to chess are often stymied when someone awkwardly tries to explain the object of the game. Your goal is to put the other king in checkmate. That means you have moved your pieces so he can't move without being in check, which means that one of your pieces could potentially capture him, except that it's against the rules to capture the king. As a boy, I often wondered why a game considered to be so elegant could have such an inelegant goal. I played the game for years before I realized that the goal of chess is actually quite simple: capture an opponent's king. All the folderol about check and checkmate is simply there to politely warn your opponent that they are in imminent danger. It is remarkable how more interested a potential chess player becomes when you tell them that simple four-word goal. The same is true for any game you create. The more easily players understand the goal, the more easily they can visualize achieving it, and the more likely they are going to want to play your game. Good game goals have three important qualities. They are 1. Concrete. Players understand and can clearly state what they are supposed to achieve. 2. Achievable. Players need to think that they have a chance of achieving the goal. If it seems impossible to them, they will quickly give up. 3. Rewarding. A lot goes into making an achieved goal rewarding. If the goal has the right level of challenge, just achieving it at all is a reward in itself. But why not go further? You can make your goal even more rewarding by giving the player something valuable upon reaching the goal. Use the lens of pleasure to find different ways to reward the player and really make them proud of their achievement. And while it is important to reward the players that achieve a goal, it is equally, or more important, that players appreciate the goal is rewarding before they have achieved it, so that they are inspired to attempt to achieve it. Don't overinflate their expectations though, for if they are disappointed with the reward for achieving a goal, they will not play again. And while it is important that each of the goals in your game have these qualities, it is also important that you have a good balance of goals in your game, with some short-term and some much longer term. This balance of goals will make your players feel they know what to do immediately, and that ultimately they will achieve something important and magnificent. It is easy to focus so much on the action of a game that you forget about the goals. To help us remember the importance of goals, let's add this lens to our toolbox. Lens number 25, the lens of goals. To ensure the goals of your game are appropriate and well balanced, ask yourself these questions. What is the ultimate goal of my game? Is that goal clear to the players? If there is a series of goals, do the players understand that? Are the different goals related to each other in a meaningful way? Are my goals concrete, achievable, and rewarding? Do I have a good balance of short and long-term goals? Do players have a chance to decide their own goals? It can be fascinating to pick up the lens of the toy, the lens of curiosity, and the lens of goals at the same time to see how these aspects of your game influence each other. Wrapping up rules. Rules are the most fundamental of all game mechanics. A game is not just defined by its rules, a game is its rules. It is important to view your game from a rules perspective, and that is lens number 26. Lens number 26, the lens of rules. To use this lens, look deep into your game until you can make out its most basic structure. Ask yourself these questions. What are the foundational rules of my game? How do these differ from the operational rules? Are there laws or house rules that are forming as the game develops? Should these be incorporated into my game directly? Are there different modes in my game? Do these modes make things simpler or more complex? Would the game be better with fewer modes? More modes? Who enforces the rules? Are the rules easy to understand, or is there confusion about them? If there is confusion, should I fix it by changing the rules or by explaining them more clearly? There's a common misconception that designers make games by sitting down and writing a set of rules. This usually isn't how it happens at all. A game's rules are arrived at gradually and experimentally. The designer's mind generally works in the domain of operational rules, occasionally switching to the perspective of foundational rules when thinking about how to change or improve the game. The written rules usually come toward the end, once the game is playable. Part of the designer's job is to make sure there are rules that cover every circumstance. Be sure to take careful notes as you playtest, because it is during these tests that holes in your rules will appear. If you just patch them quickly and don't make a note, the same hole will just show up again later. A game is its rules. Give them time and consideration they deserve. Mechanic number 5. Skill. In virtute sunt multius sensus. There are many degrees in excellence. Cicero. The mechanic of skill shifts the focus away from the game and onto the player. Every game requires players to exercise certain skills. If the player's skill level is a good match to the game's difficulty, the player will feel challenged and stay in the flow channel, as discussed in Chapter 8. Most games do not just require one skill from a player, they require a blend of different skills. When you design a game, it is worthwhile exercise to make a list of the skills that your game requires from the player. Even though there are thousands of possible skills that could go into a game, skills can generally be divided into 3 main categories. 1. Physical skills. These include skills involving strength, dexterity, coordination, and physical endurance. Physical skills are an important part of most sports. Effectively manipulating a game controller is a kind of physical skill, but many video games, such as Dance Dance Revolution and the Sony iToy, require a broader range of physical skills from players. 2. Mental skills. These include the skills of memory, observation, and puzzle solving. Although some people shy away from games that require too much in the way of mental skills, it is the rare game that doesn't involve some mental skills, because games are interesting when they're interesting decisions to make, and decision making is a mental skill. 3. Social skills. These include, among other things, reading an opponent, guessing what he is thinking, fooling an opponent, and coordinating with teammates. Typically, we think of social skills in terms of your ability to make friends and influence people, but the range of social and communication skills in games is much wider. Poker is largely a social game because so much of it rests on concealing your thoughts and guessing the thoughts of others. Sports are very social as well, with their focus on teamwork and on psyching out your opponents. Real versus virtual skills. It is important to draw a distinction here. When we talk about skill as a game mechanic, we are talking about a real skill the player must have. In video games, it is common to talk about your character's skill level. You might hear a player announce, "My warrior just gained 2 points on his sword fighting skill." But sword fighting is not a real skill required of a player. The player is really just pushing the right buttons on the control pad at the right time. Sword fighting, in this context, is a virtual skill, one that the player is pretending to have. The interesting thing about virtual skills is that they can improve even though the player's actual skill does not. The player might be just as sloppy at mashing the controller buttons as he ever was, but by mashing them enough times, he might be rewarded with a higher level of virtual skill, which allows his character to become a faster, more powerful sword fighter. Virtual skills are a great way to give a player a feeling of power. Taken too far, it can feel hollow. Some critics of massively multiplayer games complain that there's too much emphasis on virtual skills and not enough on real skills. Often, the key to a fun game is finding the right mix of real and virtual skills. Many novice designers confuse the two. It's important that you draw a clear distinction between them in your mind. Enumerating skills. Making a list of all the skills required in your game can be a very useful exercise. You might make a general list. My game requires memory, problem solving, and pattern matching skills. Or you might make it very specific. My game requires players to quickly identify and mentally rotate specific two-dimensional shapes in their heads while solving a grid-based packing problem. Listing skills can be very tricky. One interesting example comes from the game RC Pro Am, a racing game for the NES. In it, players steer this car with the joypad, the left thumb, accelerate with the A button, right thumb, and fire weapons at opponents with the B button, also right thumb. To master this game, 2 surprising skills were required. The first was problem solving. Generally on NES games, you can only push one button at a time. You take your thumb off of the A button when you want to push the B button, but in RC Pro Am, this is disastrous. It means that if you want to fire a rocket, the B button, you have to release the car's accelerator, the A button, and your opponent quickly speeds away. How to solve this problem? Some players try using a thumb for one button and one finger for the other, but this is awkward and makes the game too hard to play. The best solution seems to involve a new grip on the controller. You hold your thumb sideways on the A button so that when you want to occasionally push the B button, you can roll down onto the B button smoothly, without releasing the accelerator. Once the player has solved this problem, then they need to practice this very specific physical skill. And of course, there are many other skills involved in the game. Managing resources, missiles and mines so you don't run out, memorizing race courses, reacting to sharp turns, and unexpected road hazards, and many more. The point is that even a game that seems somewhat simple might require many different skills from a player. As a designer, you need to know what these are. It is easy to fool yourself into thinking your game is about one skill when other skills are actually more important. Many action-based video games seem, on the surface, to be mainly about quickly reacting to opponents, when in truth, there's a lot of puzzle solving required to figure out the right way to react to them, and a lot of memorization required to avoid being surprised next time you play a given level. Designers are often disappointed to realize that a game that was about quick decisions and thinking on your feet is really about memorizing which enemies pop out at what time, a very different experience for the player. The skills that a player exercises go a long way toward determining the nature of that player's experience, so you must know what these are. Viewing your game from this perspective is lens number 27. Lens number 27, the lens of skill. To use this lens, stop looking at your game and start looking at the skills you are asking of your players. Ask yourself these questions. What skills does my game require from the player? Are there categories of skill that this game is missing? Which skills are dominant? Are these skills creating the experience I want? Are some players much better at these skills than others? Does this make the game feel unfair? Can player improve their skills with practice? Does this game demand the right level of skill? Exercising skills can be a joyful thing. It is one of the reasons that people love games. Of course, it is only joyful if the skills are interesting and rewarding, and if the challenge level strikes that ideal balance between too easy and too hard. Even dull skills, such as pushing buttons, can be made more interesting by dressing them up as virtual skills and providing the right level of challenge. Use this lens as a window into the experience the player is having. Because skills do so much to find experience, the lens of skill works quite well in conjunction with lens number 1, the lens of essential experience. Mechanic number 6, chance. Our sixth and final game mechanic is chance. We deal with it last because it concerns interactions between all of the other 5 mechanics: space, objects, actions, rules, and skills. Chance is an important essential part of a fun game because chance means uncertainty, and uncertainty means surprises. And as we have discussed earlier, surprises are an important source of human pleasure and the secret ingredient of fun. We must now proceed with caution. You can never take chance for granted, for it is very tricky. The math can be difficult, and our intuitions about it are often wrong. But a good game designer must become the master of chance and probability, sculpting it to his will to create an experience that is always full of challenging decisions and interesting surprises. The challenges of understanding chance are well illustrated by a story about the invention of the mathematics of probability, invented, not surprisingly, for the express purpose of game design. The invention of probability. Il est très bon esprit, I'm not going to read that. He's a nice guy, but unfortunately no mathematician. Pascal to Fermat regarding the Chevalier de Marais. It was the year 1654, and French nobleman Antoine Gumbald and the Chevalier de Marais, pronounced Chevalier de Marais, had a problem. He was an avid gambler, and he had been playing a game where he would bet that if he rolled a single die 4 times, at least one time it would come up as a 6. He made some good money from this game, but his friends got tired of losing and refused to play it with him any further. Trying to find a new way to fleece his friends, he invented a new game that he believed had the same odds as the last one. In his new game, he would bet that if he rolled a pair of dice 24 times, a 12 would come up at least once. His friends were wary at first, but soon grew to like his new game because the Chevalier started losing money fast. He was confused because by his math, both games had the same odds. The Chevalier's reasoning was this. First game, in 4 rolls of single die, the Chevalier wins if at least 1 6 comes up. The Chevalier reasoned that the chance of a single die coming up 6 was 1 out of 6, and therefore rolling a die 4 times should mean that chance winning was 4 times 1 over 6, or 66%, which explained why he tended to win. Second game, in 24 rolls of a pair of dice, the Chevalier wins if at least 1 12 comes up. The Chevalier determined that the chance of getting a 12 double 6s on a pair of dice was 1 out of 36. He reasons then that rolling the dice 24 times meant the odds should be 24 times 1 over 36, or 66%, the same odds as the last game. Confused and losing money, he wrote a letter to mathematician Blaise Pascal, asking for advice. Pascal found the problem intriguing. There was no established mathematics to answer the question. Pascal then wrote to his father's friend, Pierre de Fermat, for help. Pascal and Fermat became a lengthy correspondence about this and similar problems, and discovering methods of solving them, established probability theory as a new branch of mathematics. What are the real odds of Chevalier's games? To understand that, we have to get into some math. Don't fret, it's easy math that anyone can do. Fully covering the mathematics of probability is not necessary for game design, and beyond the scope of this book, but knowing some of the basics can be quite handy. If you are a math genius, you can skip this section, or at least read it smugly. For the rest of us, I present 10 rules of probability every game designer should know. Rule number 1. Fractions are decimals are percents. If you are one of those people who has always had a hard time with fractions and percents, it's time to face up and deal with them, because they are the language of probability. Don't stress, you can always use a calculator, no one is looking. The thing you have to come to grips with is that fractions, decimals, and percents are all the same thing and can be used interchangeably. In other words, 1 out of 2 is 0.5 is 50%. Those aren't 3 different numbers, they are just 3 different ways of writing exactly the same number. Converting from fractions to decimals is easy. Need to know the decimal equivalent of 33 over 50? Just type 33 divided by 50 into your calculator and you'll get 0.66. What about percents? They're easy too. If you look up the word percent in the dictionary, you'll see that it really means per 100. So 66% really means 66 per 100, or 66 over 100, or 0.66. If you look at the Chevalier's math above, you'll see why we need to convert back and forth so often. As humans, we like to talk in percents, but we also like to talk about one chance in sixth, so we need a way to convert between these forms. If you are the kind of person who suffers from math anxiety, just relax and practice a few on these calculators. You'll have the hang of it in no time. Rule number 2, 0 to 1. And that's it. This one's easy. Probabilities can only range from 0 to 100%. That is, from 0 to 1. No less and no more. While you can say that there is a 10% chance of something happening, there's no such thing as a negative 10% chance, and certainly no such thing as a 110% chance. A 0% chance of something happening means it won't happen, and a 100% chance means it definitely will. This all might sound obvious, but it points out a major problem with Chevalier's math. Consider his first game with the 4 dice. He believed that with 4 dice, he had a 4 times 1 over 6, or 4 over 6, or 0.66, or 66% chance of having a 6 come up. But what if he had 7 dice? Then he would have a 7 times 1 over 6, or 7 over 6, or 1.17, or 117% chance of winning. And that is certainly wrong. If you roll a die 7 times, it might be likely that a 6 will come up at one of those times, but is not guaranteed. In fact, it is about a 72% chance. Anytime you calculate a probability that comes up greater than 100% or less than 0%, you know for certain that you've done something wrong. Rule number 3, looked for divided by possible outcomes equals probability. The first 2 rules lay some great basic groundwork, but now we are going to talk about what probability really is, and it is quite simple. You just take the number of times your looked for outcome can come up and divide by the number of possible outcomes, assuming your outcomes are equally likely. And you've got it. What is the chance of a 6 coming up when you roll a die? Well, there are 6 possible outcomes, and only one of them is the one we're looking for, so the chance of a 6 coming up is 1 divided by 6, or 1 over 6, or about 17%. What is the chance of an even number coming up when you roll a die? There are 3 even numbers, so the answer is 3 over 6, or 50%. What is the chance of drawing a face card from a deck of cards? There are 12 face cards in a deck, and 52 cards in total, so your chances of getting a face card are 12 over 52, or about 23%. If you understand this, you've got the fundamental idea of probability. Rule number 4, enumerate. If rule number 3 is as simple as it sounds, and it is, you might wonder why probability is so tricky. The reason is that the 2 numbers we need, the number of looked for outcomes and the number of possible outcomes, are not always so obvious. For example, if I asked what the odds of a flipping coin 3 times and getting heads at least twice, what is the number of looked for outcomes? I'd be surprised if you could answer that without writing anything down. An easy way to find out the answer is to enumerate all the possible outcomes. There are exactly 8 possible outcomes. Which ones have at least twice? Number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 5. That's 4 outcomes out of 8 possibilities, so the answer is 4 over 8, or 50% chance. Now, why didn't the Chevalier do this with his games? With his first game, there were 4 die rolls, which means 6 times 6 times 6 times 6, or 1296 possibilities. It would have been dull work, but he could have measured he could have enumerated all the possibilities in an hour or so. Then the list would have looked like 1111, 1112, 1113, 1114, 1115, 1116, blah 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 blah, and then counted up the number of combinations that had a 6 in them, 671, and divided that by 1296 for his answer. Enumeration will let you solve almost any probability problem if you have the time. Consider the Chevalier's second game though, 24 rolls of 2 dice. There are 36 possible outcomes for 2 dice, and so enumerating all 24 rolls would have meant writing down 36 to the 24, a number 37 digits long, combinations. Even if he could somehow write down one combination a second, it would have taken longer than the age of the universe to list them all. Enumeration is handy, but when it takes too long, you need to take shortcuts, and that's what the other rules are for.